Hi all, this is your Professor Ian. Welcome to my video lecture I entitled, What Are We Doing Here? Which is a good question to ask. Um, this is a lecture where I talk about close reading, basically. So what are we doing here? Uh, the question we all ask when we're studying literature, when we're studying texts. I like to use this metaphor of the detective. If you don't recognize these two, it's Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey from their roles in the first season of True Detective, really the only good season of that show. But, I digress. Detectives, what do detectives do? If you think about it, they're called out when there's been a crime. They go out and what do? They look for clues, right? They look for footprints. They look for, let's assume it's a murder case, just to make it exciting. They look for footprints. They look for a murder weapon. They look for DNA evidence. They look for they investigate the likely subjects or likely suspects and look for motive and opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. All these clues, all this evidence. Then what do? Then they put it together to form a theory. Okay, I have this guy's footprints. I have his fingerprints all over the knife. He has a reason to kill this person. I think it's him. This is my theory. I think it's him. And they put forth that theory, and then it goes into the legal system, right? So I like to think of that as what we do because when you're looking at literature or doing textual analysis, you're engaged in something called close reading. And that means you're engaged directly with the actual text on the page, or the visual arts on display, or the performance on the stage, or the movie, right? You can close read anything. It doesn't have to be a written text. But you're engaged with this critical analysis of what's actually there in front of you. And you're looking for textual evidence, or as a detective would look for clues, right? Footprints, DNA evidence. You're looking for that textual evidence, metaphor, the setting of the story, or the rhyme scheme of the poem, right? You're looking for that textual evidence that you can put together to form a theory, right? Oftentimes when I'm working with students who are developing their close reading skills, they want to make big claims about things based on very little evidence. Ooh, I see, the author used the word yellow in line 3. That must mean that they're talking about Yellow Submarine, the famous Beatles song, when there's no other evidence in the poem to support that. It's all about building a pattern of textual evidence. So let's look at an example, an easy one. What can we conclude? So, Johnny went to the ice cream store and bought 3 pounds of mint chocolate chip ice cream. Does Johnny like ice cream? Well, he bought a lot of it. So your conclusion that he likes ice cream, it's not without merit. But at the same time, we don't know if he's eating all that ice cream. We don't know if maybe it's for a party. Maybe Johnny is lactose intolerant and this is for his daughter's birthday party, or maybe someone sent him to buy it. We don't know based on that amount of evidence, right? The textual evidence we have in that single sentence does not give us enough evidence to conclude that Johnny likes ice cream. It's not a bad guess, but it's not a good guess either. Let's try the next one. Johnny went to the ice cream store and bought 3 pounds of mint chocolate chip ice cream. When Johnny woke up the next morning, he found the ice cream was all gone. Did Johnny eat all the ice cream? So the first sentence is the same. He went and bought the ice cream. Then we're given more evidence. So when he woke up, he found the ice cream was all gone. And what do you think? Do you think he ate the ice cream? Is that the implication of this sentence? I would argue no, because, if we look at the textual evidence, he found that the ice cream was all gone. If you eat all the ice cream, you don't wake up and find it's gone, right? That would be a weird way to describe it. So based on this textual evidence, it would be more likely that he did not eat the ice cream. It's not conclusive, right? But we can point to this textual evidence and say, based on the way this is worded and the way, Johnny discovered that the ice cream was gone, I conclude that he didn't eat it all. And it's not a bad conclusion. He might have. Maybe he was in some kind of stupor and ate all the ice cream. Yeah, who knows? But based on that textual evidence, that's a better conclusion. So let's do some more complicated examples. I gave you a couple 2-minute mysteries are called, short stories, The Case of the Missing Paper. And what was the other one called? The Case of the Missing Murdered Husband. So hopefully you read those both. If you haven't, go back and read those. I'm going to talk about them right now. In this one, we have a murdered man. We have the widow saying, "Oh, hey, I came in and is it the widow? Oh no, the butler. I'm sorry. The butler says, "Oh, I saw the killer come in and shoot him and then bang me over the head, but I was able to slip this piece of paper into the book." And then the killer must have taken the book, right? So if you read through that, right, we get to the end, and the detective says, "No, Mr. Tanner, it didn't happen that way at all, did it? Hold out your hands. You were under arrest for the murder of your employer, Mr. Wentworth." So there's some piece of textual evidence in this story that leads the detective to realize that the butler is lying, right? There's these are, I used to love reading these when I was a kid, 2-minute mysteries. They're a collection of little short stories like this that each have a little piece of textual evidence that point you to a reason why the person was lying. And, they're very artificial and, because it's just a little piece of textual evidence that unravels the whole thing, but they're a lot of fun at the same time and a good way to kind of introduce this idea of textual evidence and close reading. So if you haven't got it, it's, there's a lot of details that the butler offers, but then in the, towards the end of his story, he says, "He must have taken it after all. That's the killer. He took the book. I even remember the title of the book, sir. It was The Widow's Surprise. I quickly slipped the paper between pages 77 and 78, but just as I did, the murderer darted out the door behind me. I ran after him, and the next thing I knew, someone struck me over the head." Right? So there's nothing in that story, I mean, to prove that he didn't. But if you look at a book, right, you look at pages 77 and 78, they're always going to be printed on the same page because it always starts on page 1, right? Page 1 is always that one. And then, so that means that 77 is always going to be, get back there, is always going to be on that side of the page, and 78 is going to be on that. So you can't slip a piece of paper between those two. So for the butler to say something so specific and for it to be absolutely untrue, impossible, points to the fact that he's lying, right? So again, kind of a funny example, but that's the textual evidence that proves that he's lying. And then the detective assumes, based on that he killed his employer. Maybe that's a bit of a leap, but the fact is that textual evidence points to the fact that the butler is not telling the whole truth. The second example I find a little more fun. The case of the murdered husband. The wife comes home and claims to find her husband murdered, but the detective sees through her story. And what's the evidence? Right? She has a long story here. Someone slapped something over my mouth, like chloroform or something, passed out. And then the detective says, "You haven't touched it in the living room at all?" She shook her head firmly. "No, I did not. I didn't want to disturb clues," right? "Okay, so then I'm sure we will, or I want you to catch the scum who killed my husband," she said fervently. "I'm sure we will," Detective Nose assured her. He started into the living room to look over the scene of the crime. As he entered, he noticed the victim's feet sticking out from the other side of the couch and noted that he was in his stocking feet, his socks. So that's a bit of a red herring because it doesn't matter that he's in his stocking feet, but you might think, "Ooh, is that evidence?" It's not. It wasn't until he walked around the end of the couch that he could see Mr. Johnson lying on his stomach on the floor. 2 uniformed officers stood by him, waiting for him to arrive. That's the detective. "Help me turn him over," Detective Nose told one of them. The man was definitely dead. The blood stain had seeped into the carpet and soaked the kitchen knife that was hidden under his body. Without a word, he turned and headed back into the kitchen. And then he knows it's the wife that killed the husband. Now, how does he know that? Because if we go back and put together the textual evidence, she comes in. She hasn't seen Steve, right? She doesn't know that he's dead, according to her. She gets chloroform first, right? But she says here, "Steve was stabbed to death in the living room. There was nothing I could do. So I called the police right away," right? But down here we find that when the detectives move the body, the kitchen knife was hidden under his body. It wasn't until they move him that they see the blood stain and they see how he was killed. So she says up here, "Oh, he's in the, I saw that he was stabbed to death, so I called the police." But she couldn't have seen that unless she did the stabbing, right? So her own testimony points to the fact that she's lying, right? And notice that textual evidence. The kitchen knife was hidden under his body. It wasn't just that it was hard to see, it was hidden, right? The blood stain seeped in the carpet. And, again, she says she didn't disturb anything. She hadn't been in the living room. She hadn't checked on him. So according to her own testimony, she could not have known that he was stabbed to death. And yet she did. So he sees through her ruse. And that's about it for lecture number 1. I'm going to come back with number 2 in 1 second.